It is the first time ever that we have four generations working together. And it's a great opportunity because we have now baby boomers, what's left of them, Gen X's, Millennials, and Gen Z's learning from each other. But the greatest challenge is to get them all to work together.
Hello, welcome to the Revolving Change podcast, where we talk about your professional development skills in today's business and landscape. My name is Joanna. I'm one of the junior coaches here at Revolving Change, and here with me, as always, is our founder and resident dinosaur, Mr. Jorge Lobo. Jorge, say hi.
Say hi.
Right. So today we have a very, very juicy topic because in today's landscape, it is inevitable to see multiple generations working together. It actually may seem really, really beautiful, but it can be a pain in the butt when you're working with
It's
people
actually the
from
only time in
different.
history that we have so many generations working together.
Actually, that's true. Yeah. Yeah. Right. So if you're working with multiple generations within your team, you better listen up because today we're going to deep dive into that conversation. And at the end, we're going to have tools for you that you can access and download. So just follow along in our conversation. So, Mr. Lobo, how is it today's landscape is like what do you see with today's landscape? It's very much filled with a lot of generations. I've seen companies where there's a boomer, there's a Gen Xer, there's a millennial, and there are Gen Zs working in one company, right?
It's the first time we have so many generations working together. But it's not that it used to be in the past would be sequential, one generation passed on to the other, like passing on the baton and like the flame. Now is all working together. And that's creating a completely new situation, a new environment, new challenges. And unless one of us is living under a rock, it just jumps in our faces. Obvious how you see now. Sometimes a baby boomer like me and a dinosaur working with a Gen Z, a very young person with little experience. And sometimes some conflicts arise. But there's different points to be made. One is we only act when we see conflict. We only act when we see a problem, but don't take into account the possibility of how much better could it be if generations work together differently, better, more coordinated, with better understanding, with more empathy, with many more things that they're not aware of, that we're working intuitively and not consciously. We're not doing it by design, we're doing it by default. We just function. And it's only when things don't work that it catches our attention and we realize that, oh, there's potential for doing better. There's potential for solving the problem. There's potential for improving. So it's only when it becomes visible that companies start becoming aware. Now let's go through the different generations and let's start with the older one, baby boomers. We are just dying out. We're just being phased out. I mean, we don't have much more to say and to do. And we have passed on the baton most of the time to Gen X's. Gen X's are the next generation that has taken over. And now we are in the phase where Gen X's are transiting and passing on to millennials. Millennials are in the middle of this process in terms of taking the spot over from Gen X's, at the same time having the Gen Z's, the young people coming onto the workforce, joining the teams. And there are clearly different characteristics, different challenges, different obstacles that each one needs to deal with. But there's one clear principle that, in my experience over the years, having worked with so many companies as I have and so many managers of the different generations, which I still do luckily today. For me, luckily, because it's so inspiring and so enlightening to have exposure to so many different generations when you work with them. The fact that unless the older generation is receptive to the younger, we cannot expect the younger to grow up and lift themselves to the older. So experience You cannot rise experience. You need to descend to the level of the lack of experience and help them grow and take them with you to make it graphical. And that's one thing that has been by default and not by design. It's something that we just knew we need to pass it on. We knew we need to train our the ones that come after us, but it has not been really clearly by design. And that is one of the points where revolving change is focusing on. One of the key elements of generational issues is the fact that we act when we see the conflict, but we have a lot of friction, a lot of lost effectiveness and power in exchanges that are incomplete, and broken down communication, on conflicting priorities, on mismatched expectations. And we don't realize that that may seem to be in isolation, may seem to be standalone in business, in that department, in that process. What we're failing to recognize is that that particular problem is having as a consequence that a business process can be interrupted, that people will not get the instructions they need to get the job done the way they need to be done, that they will not have the information available to act promptly and adequately to what? To deliver quality, to produce quality, to deliver customer service. So what I'm saying is that a particular problem X between two different individuals of different generations at one point in time in the business can, as an impact, affect the whole process that will affect customer service, revenue, and profit. So the link
Yeah.
between your financial results and generational issues can be huge, but is hidden, is not visible. You need to undig it, you
Right.
need to bring it up.
Yeah, so it's interesting that you mentioned that because it is true. People don't see the connection of emotional pains and conflicts. They don't see that those emotional pains and conflicts actually translates later on into business operation pains, right?
Correct.
Right. So what are these emotional pains and what are the different operational pains that could come out because of it?
Well, this has been exacerbated over the last years because now we have five generations. Since Gen Zs came onto the market, and I'm not blaming Gen Zs for that. Okay? The Gen Z is probably going to feel immediately we're pointing fingers at them because they feel sometimes that they are being put in the spot, which they are sometimes. But this is not about that. It's the fact that the complexity has increased. It will be a bit less when the baby boomers disappear, but still there is a lot of complexity with Gen X's, Millennials, and Gen Z's working together. That is where the focus is. And what are the emotions? Well, if we start with Gen X's that are starting to think about the golfing retirement and going to sunny Florida and passing on the baton to their millennial managers in the business, they want to delegate, they want to get rid of it. They have, in their opinion, given what they could give, which I question, and I have clients where we have had this conversation that they start realizing, like, oh yeah, well, we intuitively gave it all over. What they did is throw it over the wall and hope that the other side would catch it, but it was not an orderly process to transist. So, what are the emotions? Emotions at the Gen X level is frustration because the millennials cannot cope with it. Millennials are not coming fast enough. Millennials are not being focused enough. And if we told you what to do and give you the tools, so just get on with it and do it. Leave me alone. So we are generalizing. It doesn't always apply. So I send that up front because some of our audience will say like, well, in our case it's different. Yeah, for sure. No, it's not all the time and not everywhere. But we need to draw a line somewhere. Now, millennials are the ham in the sandwich. Okay, you have uh, the Gen X's and you have the Gen C's and millennials in the middle. So millennials are absorbing, taking over. So their emotion is, give me everything you have, teach me, share with me, make me more resourceful, make me more powerful. At the same time, that emotion is, the sponge. I need information. I need to learn. I want to learn. And my experience and our experience, you and I have had this conversation before, with millennials is the millennials are resourceful. Millennials take action. Millennials are the ones that know both worlds. You know, they grew up into the tech world, but they still understand the prior world to tech, which is the next world, before digitalizing everything and automating everything. But their subordinates are Gen Zs, where all is technology and all is automation. So when you have a Gen X saying, we need to rewind the tape, a Gen Z would look at him and say, what do you mean by rewinding the tape? What tape? What rewinding? What does it mean? They've never seen a tape. They don't know what rewinding means. So I'm using a simple communication example, but the emotion of, going back to the emotion of the millennial is, the challenge is massive. The emotion is of, I'm challenged. I need to cope now with the Gen X that is throwing all this at me, hoping that I will assimilate it. And I have to translate it, convert it, translate it into actions, systems, means, vocabulary that the Gen Z will understand. Finally, the Gen Z emotion is like, what do you guys want from me? You know, I've been working so many hours. I'm off. This is what my job is. I did my job. I have enough. Just increase my salary. Give me a bonus. I want another week of holiday. I'm generalizing. Gen Zs, please don't get offended with me. Please don't. Please don't. Because not all of them. I mean, we have Gen Zs in our team, and they're amazing people. They're not like that. They're not like that. Okay, so I hope our Gen Zs are not going to quit after they hear me say what I'm just saying. But Gen Zs have it because of lack of experience. They know what they know. They don't know what they don't know. So we cannot expect the Gen Z to come up to the level of a millennial, mind even higher. So the millennial is demanded to still cope with the Gen X's that are feeding information, but descend, and it's not meant to derogatorily, adjust to the level of a Gen Z as of how will a Gen Z understand, how to communicate with a Gen Z, how to give assignments to a Gen Z, how to massage them that they don't get offended, they don't figure out, they don't find themselves exposed. It's challenging. So our experience has been that millennials, which are the majority at this time, at least, of our memberships, they're the ones that mostly benefit from what we do, that mostly find what we do, find echo in what we do, and they also give us a lot of input. I find it very rich when I work with them, like you being a millennial. But that's what the challenge is in the marketplace. Getting companies to understand your Gen X that's going to transfer the power, the knowledge, the experience, the systems, the vision, the values to millennials. Millennials will have to translate that, convert it into a language, content, and actions that the Gen Zs will understand. And I'm not talking about gender, I'm not talking about culture, because when you add to all what I just described, which is quite complex, may seem simple, but it's not. When you add to that gender issues, you know, empowering female executives with more authority, new CEOs and new business founders, female business founders, you know, lots of them coming up massively, which is fantastic. But also cultures, and you have Southeast Asians with Europeans, with North Americans, with Brazilians, that it's a different challenge. So that adds an additional level of complexity.
Yeah, so every generation really does has their own strengths, weaknesses, perspective, points of views, and things like that. How then do we make it work together? You know, how do we meld all of these generations together to actually create a positive impact towards the business, towards our teamwork? You know,
It is more a leadership than it is a management issue. So why leadership? Because it comes top down, needs to be propagated from the leadership of the business, the owner, from the baby boomers that may still be around. Problem will be that baby boomers, in my experience, are not very receptive to that because they didn't see it as a challenge. It was not a challenge. In those days, we baby boomers just pass it on, delegate it, give instructions. and leadership was incorporated in what we were doing. Today, you have a more clear differentiation between leadership and management. So it begins with leadership. How do we deal with this? The key was to first make sure each generation understands how they perceive themselves, so perception management. Let me share with you how I perceive myself in my generation, how we see ourselves. And then you're going to tell me how you see me. Share with us your perception of our generation. Let's find a common ground, a common content, a common definition, a common description of how our interaction is going to work based on our perception and your perception of our generation. Then we do the same with you. I will tell you how I perceive you after you describe to me your perception of self. So we're going to have now an exchange of our value set, our perceptions, our beliefs. But at the end of that, hopefully when it's done right, and we did it right all the time because it worked, a shopping list of the do's and the don'ts on how to work with each other.
Yeah, that's very interesting you say that, because not only the perceptions need to be communicated, but I believe the expectations of each other also
Absolutely.
comes into play. I've
Absolutely.
heard of being a millennial myself, I worked with baby boomers like yourself, Gen Xers and Gen Zers. And the common thing that I do hear them say is, oh, like from the baby boomers, they're like, oh, they complain about something that the younger generation should automatically be doing, but that's an expectation that was not communicated to the younger generation. It doesn't come naturally to us because we grew up in a totally different generation, totally different political climate, totally different culture. So there's a lot of different things. So to assume that they should already know this is not really realistic, you know?
No, it is
So
ineffective.
that's why,
It will produce
yeah.
conflict. It will produce conflict. As a matter of fact, expectations, you hit the nail on the head. Expectations is very important, but also the understanding of how we get to expectations. So I need to explain, as a baby boomer, I need to explain a Gen X, but particularly jumping over Gen X, because Gen X and baby boomers have a lot in common. But to a millennial, how we were raised, how do we understand, how do we learn? We learned the hard way. We didn't have Google to get an answer to a question. We need to go to a library, get a book, and I can show you some of the books that I have, which are this thick about production planning. It is only about one subject, and it's 3,000 pages of very thin paper and very small print. All right, so it's more. It is like a Google on that topic because you're going to find on the keywords. It has keywords, right? We already have keywords. You can find the topic that you're looking for, downtime planning, machine setting, whatever it is you're looking for, and then you go to the page and start reading it up. It is a digital, I'm sorry, it's an analog way of searching information. But yeah, we need 50, 60, I don't know how many. I have boxes of books, which I'm not using anymore because it's all on the web today. But I will show you some of those books. I think it would be good to share as an example for the younger generations that never had to do it, because understanding the way we learned, and I'm talking about Gen X's, but let's talk about Gen X. Let's pretend I'm a Gen X. Like Gen X's learned is different than the way millennials learn. My daughters are millennials. And I remember conversations with them. Well, now it's a long time ago, but they were already in their late 20s when I would be looking for something and say, yeah, I need to figure out how that works. And I think I have a book, and they look at each other, my two daughters, and they're like, Daddy, just Google it. Like, oh, okay, yeah, sure. Because it wouldn't cross my mind. It would not be a spontaneous, normal reaction. For them, it was like, oh, I need a book. I mean, it's out there. Just click on it and you have it. Right. Let's leave aside now the question how accurate information is, how much garbage there is, and how much good. Let's leave that for another conversation. So the bottom line is that we need to understand from each other, how did we get to where we are and how did we become what we have become? Because that's going to help understanding each other much, much better. Like my daughters did, teachers, no, daughters did. Um, like, why don't you Google it, right? For them, it's so obvious. Now I have learned and do it. I mean, you do it all the time. We're talking about something and you have a question. Before you even ask me, you go and just search it, and you already have information. We discuss it, and it goes like that to solve potential questions. Where in the past, that question would be a conversation. That is not a conversation. It's a short, quick exchange. We compare notes, my experience, my knowledge with you, what you've researched. You match it, you draw a conclusion, you're done, you move on. So it's so much more effective, so much more efficient than it was. But we need to learn how each other functions. The same applies to a millennial and a Gen Z. I hear the Gen Z is complaining about different things than the millennials complain. When I heard, and you mentioned the point of complaints, when I heard millennials complaining, I went like, what are you complaining about? You don't know how easy you have it. You have no idea how tough it was. Of course you had no idea how tough it was because you were not there. But I cannot expect you to understand how tough it was. So I need to understand that I need to come to your level and understand the way you work. I will explain the way it was in my world to illustrate it and for you to maybe be more empathetic, maybe more patient with us. But it will not change the way you work. We need to adjust to your way because your way is the newer way. And you're going to face the same thing. I'm saying millennials will face the same thing with the Gen Zs coming up.
Yeah.
The challenge is that Gen Zs are not as driven as millennials. And that's going to be the challenge for millennials. Sorry, Gen Zs. No offense. No offense.
Yeah. I think also one of the things that needs to be considered aside from perception management, communicating expectations, is communication itself. Even the manner of how you would speak to a different generation, you have to somehow adapt to the best of your abilities. Because if you don't adapt your communication style, how are you supposed to convey the perceptions or expectations that you have on the other generation?
You nail it on the head, 100%, because the key in communication is feedback. Feedback is the key for it to work, succeed, or fail. Why? Because feedback was extremely important in Gen X. Let's forget the baby boomers, okay? We leave them out. Gen X's learned, because they are trained managers and leaders, that feedback is absolutely essential. And they pass it on to, or they're passing it on to millennials. So millennials are, by training and by their value set, receptive to feedback. The same, in my experience, in our experience, does not apply yet to Gen Zs. Gen Zs, if you, I've seen reactions more like, if you got something to tell me, tell me. Otherwise, leave me alone. It was less polite than that, but the message was that. Whereas a millennial would be very receptive to the feedback, would analyze the feedback, would give feedback, and would have the feedback exchange because they've been trained. So you hit the nail on the head when you said communication. Narrowing it down to feedback. The key is going to be that millennials are become the champions in feedback and how they're going to be training Gen Zs to understand feedback, to learn to adopt feedback, and to grow into the management world. And feedback is going to be the key, is going to unlock the door.
Yeah, wow, okay, yeah. So you have communicate the perception of each other, communicate expectations as well, communicate adapting communication styles, and more importantly, giving feedback on a regular. That is the key to communicating all of these well. Right. Okay.
Maybe
Now,
making feedback integral to the management process, to the culture, to the
right.
values. Feedback must be a massive, major component.
Okay. That makes a lot of sense. Now, how does this all tie together then? Like, so you have these multiple generations. Let's say that they do work on this. They do implement. They make it part of their culture to continually communicate feedback and include feedback in their processes, whether it's communicating perceptions, communicating expectations, and things like that. How does this all work together then? Like, what brings it in?
It has to be, at the end of the day, We need to start with there has to be the objective. The objective must be that there is an orderly, lasting transition between generations. So there has to be a process which is clearly defined up front with the objective at the end of having this transition, where we'll be passing on the way we manage, the way we communicate, the way we set expectations, the way we give feedback, the way we don't give feedback. So all the do's and all the don'ts at the same time equally important. But there has to be an orderly process where we're going to transist, which is part of what transformational human engineering at Revolving Change is, getting each generation to feed into and build and work together with the following generation. Gen Zs are going to be facing this in another 10 years from now, maybe less, because people are maturing earlier, adopting technology earlier. So the cycles are becoming shorter and faster. So the process, when I compare the process of evolution, when I started in the business, and I'm talking decades ago, it was revolving change already, and there was transformational human engineering already. But the time, the speed of the process was slower and has been increasing steadily and is gaining momentum all the time because technology is enabling people to do things faster. The key is we need to keep our skills evolving with it. You can have the greatest automation, the greatest machinery, the best software in the world. If people don't know how to work with each other, that technology will not deliver what it needs to deliver. The results are not going to be there. You're going to suffer. Still, luckily, fortunately for us all, people remain the common denominator. You can put on top of it all the technology you want, all the speed you want, but this technology, this way of doing things needs to also adapt to the speed of consumption of people. People need time to adjust and learn, but it's becoming compressed, it's becoming shorter. So Gen Z is having less time and have more pressure, and so do millennials that need to transist. So the ordered transition of coordinating, transmitting, delegating the process is going to be critical for generations to continue to improve working together. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, actually, yeah. That is something that's very important that people don't seem to realize, that there has to be an intention, a design on how to
That's the
orderly
key.
transition.
That's the key. The intention. Intention. The key is to have to do it by design and not by default. You need to decide we need an effective ordered transition. And that transition has to have content. You need to have steps. Everybody is going to be involved in that process. That has to be, like you said, intentional by design and not by default. By default is going to be left at luck that we do things and maybe it works, maybe it doesn't work. We throw stuff over the wall. Sometimes the stuff stinks that we throw on the wall and we hope it sticks. No, it's too dangerous and too important. Like I said at the beginning, we discussed at the very beginning, you have two people having a conflict of different generations and may seem an isolated issue. It might not be because this could affect the production process of communication, quality control, quality assurance, product design. An error in product design can cost a company its livelihood, its existence. You end up having $1 million order for a product that you cannot ship and you lose the order and you invested hundreds of thousands of dollars in developing the product. So I'm not painting black scenarios. I'm giving examples of things that I have seen happen. So how do you prevent that? Bringing it mainstream, make it conscious, and like you said, by design. I think that's the key word.
Yeah, actually, the intentionality should be there. That's a really, really rich discussion today. Like, the impact is eye opening. An argument in one end amongst generations could really impact the bottom line of the company, and it's something that shouldn't be taken lightly.
Yes, we're getting a transition plan, called a generation transition plan. So putting in just the bullets, the kind of thing like a checklist. Maybe do in checklist format. I haven't decided yet exactly how we're going to document it, but this is becoming more of age. Now we're having more clients asking the questions. Now we have more millennials and Gen Zs joining also. I mean, Gen Zs, we have for the first time this year working with Gen Zs that are asking questions
Mm.
which are relevant. And you have
Mm.
the Gen Xs that want to get the hell out. So they're interested in having a structured way of passing on the baton. So we're working on this document, and I think it could be like a checklist or
Yeah.
probably a checklist, yeah, with all
Yeah,
these
more so.
elements.
So
So
if
we'll make
you
it available. Yeah.
right. Right. So if you want to be notified of when that is available, make sure you sign up for our newsletter because that will be there. The announcement for the release of that checklist will be available in our newsletter. So just visit our website or click the link below. All right. So that was a very, very rich conversation we had today about the multiple generations. Certainly relating much to the topic, given that I work with a boomer, a Gen Zs, also fellow millennials, even within millennials itself. Let's not get into it. We could have another topic about working with the generations, across generations and within each generations. That's another topic in itself.
Before we go, I would appreciate an exchange with you that you help me understand. And for that, I will provide you with information once you let me know, are you top management or mid management? And just add the level what management you are and what is the generation you find the hardest to work with. That's it. Just write, I'm top management, I'm mid management, and which generation you find the hardest. And we're going to compile the information and put it together and make a report out of that and share it with you. But that would be extremely helpful. I really would appreciate it.
Right. Yeah. So just go ahead and do that and comment below. So if you found our podcast helpful today, make sure you give us a follow, and come back next week for the next Revolving Change podcast. Also, explore all our other videos, which will be linked at the end card after this. So thank you for your time. Goodbye, and see you again next time. This has been Joanna and Jorge saying goodbye for now. Bye.
Bye.